My name is Jean-Pierre Lacroix, or JP, and I'm president of a customer experience transformational agency. And we spend a lot of time looking at the future because our goal is to inspire all of you for better customer experiences. And about 2 years ago, we were running a strategic foresight exercise, and we're saying, what are the future trends in the banking industry and actually in retail in general? And what we saw was a backlash on inclusivity and diversity in the marketplace. We saw starting to see that kind of negativity happening in social media. And so we said, you know, this is concerning. So let's do a study to really understand what is the impact on diversity in the banking sector. And we just came out of field about 2 months ago with this study. And for those of you, how many of you here are retailers? All right. Well, the next slide has the retail study. And so these two slides I have at the end of the presentation so that you can scan it and download hot off the press study. And what we're seeing here is that, first of all, the banking industry has been an icon on DEI, diversity and inclusivity. When you look at banks like TD, Chris hit up and we'll introduce the panel in a couple of seconds. We're just setting the context here. Yes, the banking industry, and part of that was that you provide access to money. And you under a lot of pressure to be inclusive and to appeal to a diverse group of customers, and hence put a lot of programs in place within your institutions to ensure that you deliver that. However, what we're seeing here is that your role and the role of DEI is under attack. And what I'm hoping today, and with the study we provide, will give you the ammunition that when these discussions about the role of DEI and the importance of DEI and how do we execute DEI come into play, that you will have the information, we'll arm you with the information that you'll be able to provide insightful direction for your organization. Because as we know, there's a for and against. You know, if you look at a lot of how the stock market, how the investment community look at your institutions, specifically those that are publicly traded, you know, you've got advocates for diversity. But on the flip side, you've got consumers saying, I've had enough of having this diversity thrown down my throat. It's not relevant to my community. Why do we need to talk about this? Why should we talk about this in the schools? And it's not getting any better. If you look at these stats, you know, racial discrimination is on the rise. It's not going away. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. And we're also seeing that, you know, when you look at DI roles and you look at what's happening in the marketplace, we're seeing a lot of attrition happening in the marketplace. You know, I think for you, it's time to kind of reevaluate DEI, what it means to your organization. Specifically, as we get more and more publicization, you know, who is making the noise? Our study looked at who's making that noise. Is it a big percentage of the population? Actually, it's not. It's 5% of the population that have an issue with DEI. 5% of the population. And obviously, it's in smaller rural markets, in secondary markets. And obviously politicians, cities, universities, they're all playing up on, even in Canada. Just recently, our government gave a travel warning to travel to the US. Can you believe this? To travel to Florida. If you're LGBTQ, you shouldn't travel to Florida. You should ensure that you don't promote your values in Florida because it's not safe for you. Who would have thought of that 2 years ago, that you'd actually have governments giving. You know, so the 5%, yes, they're there and they're very vocal. But what we found out in our study is that 55% said, and specifically the younger consumers, that if you provide a more inclusive, diversified experience, we're going to be much more brand loyal to you. So you're caught between a rock and a hard place to diversify or not. And what our study shows, and I'll pop this up and then we'll get right into the panel. It shows what are the strategies and what are the insights I'll share with you. The number one place to deliver DEI, where the customers expect you to deliver DEI and where it's meaningful to them, isn't social media. It's not on your website, because you're all doing a great job of that. It's actually in the physical branch. It's where they interact with people, not AI, not digital technology, human beings. And we know that the branch is the most important place to drive growth. And so delivering and understanding DI is really important. So now I'm going to let my panel introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Jan Kuhnle. I am the Chief People and Diversity Officer at Heritage Bank of Commerce.
I'm EJ Kritz. I'm the Executive Vice President of Training and Customer Experience Insight Strategy at APC.
And I'm Chris Damper. I'm Senior Vice President of Transformation at Hudson's Bay. And for the non-Canadians in the room, that is North America's oldest retailer. It's 353 years old. If there's any Canadians in the room, shout out for Hudson's Bay. There we go.
Great. So, Jen, how do you define diversity for your organization?
I think it's different for every organization. This is my third in the last 20 years, and I would say there's a debate on even the definition of diversity, because in its dictionary meaning, it's diverse. They're disparate. And so in my organization, when we talk about diversity, we don't just talk about diversity, we talk about inclusion. Because diversity is the separation, inclusion is bring all of those pieces together. In a nutshell, I think that diversity could be used in a negative way, and that's kind of what we're seeing. And hopefully we get to this, but it can also be used in a very positive, powerful way if we did it right.
Absolutely. And we saw that the risk of making a statement on diversity is making that statement and pulling out. If you look at Budweiser, what they did, I think it was Bud, and also Target, the mistake they did wasn't that they made a commitment to diversity. The mistake they made is they made a commitment on diversity and then they backtracked. And so it was a lose-lose. They were going to lose both parties. EJ?
Definition of diversity?
Yeah, for you.
I really like what Jan said, and it's very difficult to talk about diversity without also talking about inclusion. And the word that I think I would add to the whole conversation is the word authenticity. And providing an environment for both your employees and your customers to bring their real selves to the retail environment, to bring their true, genuine self to work every day. And it's not, so I'm a training provider, but I'm gonna say this anyway. It's not a training. It's not a poster in your break room. It's not, to your point, it's not something on your website. It's a deeper ideology that has to start from the top of the organization and permeate down. And it's something that needs to live and breathe every single day. And it's a challenging thing because I don't know that it can be an intentional thing. When we see true authenticity and diversity and inclusion, it's organic. It's because really good human beings with really phenomenal values were all hired to work at the same place at the same time and naturally created something that makes people feel alive and to be able to be their true self. And for anybody who says that DEI is not a customer experience strategy, by the way, it's a customer experience strategy. That's why I love when HR and CX sit in the same room together, which is very infrequent. That's a big miss for HR and CX to not talk together. Because I'll tell a quick story. So I was sitting with a bank CEO, and I was presenting a strategy on how I felt we were in the basement of JD Power. And my presentation of how we were going to get out of the basement of JD Power included a whole section on DEI and what will it mean to growing relationships and NPS and everything like that if we really create an environment where folks can be themselves and bring their real selves to work every day. And he looks at me dead in the face. He goes, I just don't get how that helps us win JD Power. And I said, I just don't get why you're our client. Because we have to have that connection together.
Yeah, that's a great
Can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
Authenticity and bring your true self to work, that's also been in the debate. Do you bring your best self to work, or do you bring your authentic, true self to work? And being in the people business, I would say it's a little bit scary to say, be your complete true self. And then we get into some issues. So anyway, that's been sort of the debate within our company.
I'm glad, cool that you also said like your real self or your best self. And I would argue when you are your real self, you are your best self. So.
I would agree. EJ and I both shared a long part of our careers at TD, both in the US and Canada. And so I think we've been influenced and impacted by the time there about bringing your true self and your authentic self to work, because it was a key component of what the culture was and what we stood for. But I will definitely say it is different on both sides of the border. It's different environments in the U.S. and Canada, although we continue to see the rise of populism in Canada as well, mirroring what's been happening in the U.S. in the past. And so I think that's a bit of a concern for everybody who's focused on that. And the Bud Light example is a great example of what happens when a brand starts to waver on that commitment. So I think for me, the definition would be empowerment and consistency would be the two words that I would add to the definitions that you used and what you suggested. Empowerment, meaning that all levels of the organization are in a position to work with customers, to empower both staff and customers to bring that full authentic experience to life. And then consistency, you can't be in or out. I remember in a period of my career, we were a large sponsor of Pride. In fact, the largest sponsor of Pride events in North America. We had a conversation with a senior executive who said, well, you know what, I think we'll do this for a couple of years, and then I don't know if we need to continue. And you look at what that means to the organizations when you pull out, the signal that you're sending when you withdraw your support is even greater than the signal that you send when you put your support in. So I think it needs to be consistency and pervasive at all levels of the organization and in all facets of the organization, customer-facing and employee-facing.
So when you think of delivering DEI as part of the built environment, so the physical aspect, because it's somewhat easy and it's a great recruiting strategy to have diversity and having your statement about diversity on your website and what you stand for. Imagery, we did a whole analysis that's part of this study of, I think, 20 banks, and we looked at their diversity, inclusive, their marketing, their social media, all that. And banks, financial institutions, credit unions do a fantastic job of telling the story online. And that's that's an easy solution because it's 1 to 1,000. It's not 1 to 1. But a branch experience is really 1 to 1. Right? So it's creating that. So when I think of diversity and inclusivity, and you could look at it on a continuum of people that are handicapped or physically or mentally impaired, all the way up to different values of life and lifestyle. But when you look at the physical experience, so you have you're located in LA and you've got one, I think, location. Is it how many locations do you have your financial institution?
17.
17. Sorry, there's a 1 there somewhere. Talk to me a little bit about DEI within the physical built environment within your market.
So what I just thought of was previously I was with a company, $3 trillion deposit.
We know who they are.
Name the name.
There's some people in the room with them.
But in New York, we had the Pride billboards up everywhere. It was splashed everywhere. And I was part of the DEIB culture for Consumer Bank, and part of my role was to determine what's appropriate in these physical locations. And it was interesting sort of talking to our business line CEO and others, and I think there's somebody here also who worked on this with me. Yes, we have it in New York and it's all over the screen, but in the physical branches, we were not going to display any support for Pride. And there is a disconnect, like you said, there's a disconnect. And so at some point you think about, is it just a marketing ploy? Is it just a tagline? Is it just something you post on your internet and intranet to attract people? But once people actually come here to work with you, or clients actually come here to bank with you, then what? Then where is that inclusivity and that belonging? So it's just been
It's a battle.
It's been a battle and a conflict, and everybody has a different opinion.
Yeah. And unless you have a strong cultural belief, Chris talks about, you're going to waver depending on the market. Yeah.
You also have to know your segment that you're targeting. I mean, that's the number one thing. And yesterday when we heard about Dave's Hot Chicken, you have to know your audience, because you can't be everything to everybody. And once you know your audience, then you know sort of, okay, what's my DEIB strategy going to be?
Yeah, great point.
The consumers can see through it so fast too. I mean, those rainbows disappear on July 1st real fast, don't they? It's
All depends on the company and the institution.
right, but that's my overall point is you can the frauds are alive and well.
Yes. Yeah.
And you can sniff out a DEI fraud a mile away, and they're a dime a dozen. And I'm glad you brought up too that it goes so much beyond be it pride or the things that are I had a situation. I had an injury this past year, and I had never been physically unable in my life, and that was a gift. I know that sounds weird. But that was a gift, to be physically unable for a period of time and to experience, like, handicap ramps are a pain in the ass. I'm just going to tell you right. They're just not. They're not good. They're not well maintained. But I heard this great story recently of there's a bank, and this would go for banks in the room, but also retailers. There's a bank called Quantic, and they've got a really cool product. Your debit card can be a ring. It's a wearable debit. So if you're at a music fest or whatever, and you don't feel like bringing a wallet, boom, there's your payment right there. And I think it's great for retailers. It's a cool way to take payment and all that. But I heard this particular story of a gentleman who had the Quantic payment ring, and it was only because of that payment device he had a stroke, and he can't use both hands together. And so he can use one independently. And so he can take things off of a shelf in a grocery store. But when it comes time to actually open the wallet and take out a card to make a payment, that's a non-starter. That can't happen. And it was only because of this Quantic payment ring, coupled with the retailer's ability to take that payment, that all of a sudden this person was given the gift of actually being able to grocery shop by himself. And the amazing feeling of inclusion that he must have had, and that independence and that gift that both that bank and that retailer were able to provide to him, is an incredible story. But for us as CX leaders, those things are very, very hard to plan for and very, very hard to predict. And we really do have to cast a rather wide net on that, the work that we do in the physical environment, to not just have it be about, how are we decorating the store this month, or what poster are we putting up that month, but what are the real brick and mortar elements that create inclusion?
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I'm struck on the conversation, and maybe we'll get it in the Q&A part, on that you can decide it's for a segment or it's what your organization believes in. And so the organizations I've worked for it's who your organization is. It's not for a segment, it's who the company is. And it has to permeate through the organization. And so at Hudson's Bay, as an example, we are Pride 365, so we don't take the posters down. We believe in Pride all year long. But we now actually back that up with LGBTQ2+ designers, clothing lines, manufacturers. And so it's not enough to say, yep, we'll march in a parade and we'll put a poster up, but now we've got to make sure that we have designers and brands that represent the community. Black designers is another thing, which is we are proud to support Black designers, but you actually have to have Black designers showcased and focused in your stores. It's not enough just to say it. And I just don't think you get I think if it's who your organization is, I don't think you get the opportunity to opt out. I'll share a story where I worked for a CEO and we had big support of Pride, and we had a customer complain, probably $7 to $10 million on deposit, and said, I don't like this. I don't like what you're doing. I don't understand it. I think it's wrong. I don't support it. And the reaction of the CEO was amazing. He said, great, where would you like your draft drawn up to transfer your funds out of the company? It wasn't, we'll modify it for you, or I hear you, and yes, we're going to think about that. It was, know what? No, that's who we are. If you don't like it, see you later. And so I think that's the consistency we've been trying to take at Hudson's Bay, is this is who we are and this is what we stand for.
Yeah, and how many employees were driven to have higher engagement because they knew that CEO, made that move?
And that demonstrates, you talk about bringing your whole self or your true self to work. You're not going to do that if the CEO says, you know what, you're right. We're only in to support LGBTQ2+ at certain times or in certain instances. But if you've got the backing of the organization, it really helps bring your true self to work.
I love that, true self to work. That's great. We've had this conversation. We were warming up, and we did a presentation to one of the banks as a warm-up to see, does the research findings kind of resonate with them? And the outcome there was, I think we need to change the term DEI. I think DEI's got some baggage with it. Maybe we need to call it belonging, because isn't that what it's all about? It's giving customers a sense of belonging, that they belong with this institution, that it's not about race, sexual orientation or religion. It's about, I feel like I belong to this brand. So when you think of belonging and you think of, the organization and the physical asset, what are the things you think the banks could do tomorrow, the institutions could do tomorrow to give their customers that sense of belonging?
I think it's an outcome for me. So unpacking DEIB, diversity is disparate, differences. I is inclusion, that we already talked about. So we're all at a party. You probably may have heard this example. And we're all there and we're all diverse, right? The inclusion part is I'm going to ask EJ or JP or Chris to come to the dance floor and dance with me. That's inclusion, right? And then equity is, did everybody get the opportunity to attend the party in the first place? That's the equity part. Did I get the opportunity for a promotion or career advancement or whatever that is? And belonging is, how do I feel once everything is said and done? Okay, how do I feel about having been included, having been invited, seeing the diversity? And so to bring belonging, it's really the receiving end of how do I feel about, and do I feel like I really belong here?
That's great. That's a great way of capturing it all. You do training.
Wow, gosh.
I love that.
Yeah.
Perfect.
You've heard this before.
Yeah, I have.
It's a great synopsis.
I always screw it up, though. You did it really well. I think the only thing I could even add to what you're talking about is the hiring part. So tomorrow morning, when I'm going to have 3 high school seniors on the stage, and we're going to talk about Gen Z stuff. And one of the things that you'll hear tomorrow, but I'll give you a little sneak preview now, is that feeling of belonging is enhanced. So this will be for anybody in any industry here, is when you hire people that drive that sense of belonging, where I relate to this person. This person not only represents the brand, but they represent who I am too. If I'm a huge fan of Under Armour, and I walk into an Under Armour store, do the people working in that store not only deliver on the brand promise, but am I comfortable with them? Do I feel some sort of a connection to the human capital that's there in the building? And so from a training perspective, I can't train you to be an awesome human being. So like the advice I always give to banks, and if you've been at this event before, you're now going to hear me say this again, stop hiring bankers. Banking's not hard. I'm really sorry. It's not. We can train you to be a banker. I can't train you to be a good person, though. That's got to come through in the hiring phase. And where I really struggle, though, is branch managers or general managers in retail or store managers in a restaurant either lack the time, lack the skill, or both to conduct really great behavioral interviews and make sure that we're hiring the human being and training the skills later. So I get really passionate, really charged up about when our company gets invited to train leaders on behavioral hiring practices so that we're just getting a really good person in the door to begin with and figuring out the rest later.
That's a great point. Chris?
No, I would fully agree with that statement. And I think I always said hire for attitude, train for skill is the approach. And the best place, in one of my previous roles, I ran a large region with a large number of branches. And, the best place to look for that is in the service industry with great attitude, great energy, and people that are passionate about what they do. And I think that shines through in terms of the work that you see and the output that you get and the engagement that you get with your customers.
It was funny, in the study we looked at, what do consumers want? How do they perceive DEI? And we asked executives, what's the role of DEI in delivering that experience? And the consumers want a sense of belonging. They want to know that the staff in that branch, in that physical asset, represent them, that there's somebody that represents them. Whereas bankers think the solution is through technology. We need technology to be able to talk to our customers. Maybe it's translation or simultaneous language translation, all of that. And I think there's the disconnect because on one side is technology, and we're kind of coming off of this digital transformation adrenaline rush of having to do that quick change that's worked so well for you. And now we're in the hard part of building relationships, which is the one-on-one that EJ talks about. And that critical, I call moment of truth, is ensuring that the staff in that branch represents the community in that market. And that's a tough thing to do for shortage of staff. Thoughts on that? Staffing and representing the demographics of that trading area.
I think it all is about people. I mean, we had to have mandatory empathy training. As customers come in, they're upset about something. And instead of escalating, we held de-escalation. How do you give the empathy? Oh, I'm sorry that you're going through such a hard time with your, whatever the case was. And it kind of really diffuses the situation. And people are looking for that type of empathy and interaction.
Yeah. EJ?
I always say, again, hire an empathetic person and you can more easily train them on how to empathize and what to specifically say. In terms of, staffing for the market too, I think one of the big challenges is we have a number of industries that just are flat out not sexy anymore. Accounting is a big one. I work with one of the big CPA firms. People don't want to become CPAs anymore because they don't want to work 60, 70 hours. And so a lot of these high demand roles, being a banker, is like a sexy, I can't wait to be a banker.
Come on.
Sorry, Chris. But, again, I think we need to, in multiple industries, start telling a different story of what is your life like in this role? How will you be fulfilled in this role? How will you enrich the lives of others in this role? How can you be yourself in this role? And now I think we can start to retell the story and attract the talent that we really need. And the other big thing, advice that I would give, if you want to start staffing more towards the demographics of your market area, take your job description, okay? You'll have shred bins in your office. Go put them in there because they're terrible. right? The job description is, we're so damn special because this, here's what you're gonna do, other duties as assigned, equal opportunity employer. Done. And very seldom does the job description speak to, if you're looking for an extrovert, here's the example I give is you look at the cereal aisle at the grocery store, right? And look at the cereal that's on like the second shelf from the bottom, right? It's Trix, it's that awesome Reese's cereal. It's the stuff for the kids, right? And how is the box designed? It's colorful, it's exciting, it's engaging. And then look up top, right? That's where JP cereal's at. No, I'm just kidding. But you got the Special K, and you got the brand, and you got the wheat stuff, right? Like all that stuff.
No sugar.
No sugar. And a lot of nutritional facts on the thing.
Yep.
And so we do this exercise in one of our trainings. I buy blank cereal boxes, and we bring it to the training, and I say, just design the cereal box for the employee that you want to have apply for the job. And then compare it to your actual job description, and they are polar opposite every time. So if we actually start thinking about the job as a product and we're not speaking to the human being that we want to apply for that job, a lot of us who complain about staffing, you got plenty of applicants. They're just garbage. Mm-hmm. So how do we get a better employee that's more resemblant of the brand that we want to deliver? We got to redesign our cereal box.
I don't know if I go to court and our defense is look at the cereal box. I don't know if
just leave the equal opportunity employer thing on the bottom and you'll be fine.
I actually think you have to engage the constituents in the process. And so, if you want representation, you need representatives to go out and talk to the community and go where places where you historically have not gone. And I know, again, in one of my roles, we were, if the percentage of the population in the trade area was 20% Black, we were about 4% Black manager representation in a community that was over 20%. And so you look at that and you say, so why are people not coming? They don't see themselves, they can't see themselves, they don't see peers, they don't see representation that says, oh, I see someone who can do that, therefore I will be able to do that myself. And so I think you have to take the people that you have in your organization and help them be advocates and allies to drive that change and drive that demonstration that there is a place for you. You can fit here. You can be part of this process. You should be able to see yourself here. And what are the reasons that you don't? And then address those systemic issues on why you don't see yourself here. And I think it's got to be very purposeful.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to open it up now. I think we've got 10 minutes left for any questions from the audience. There's a young lady over here.
Yikes.
Yeah, behind you, behind the column. There you go.
Okay. There you go. What recommendations do you have for tactics to get your C-suite to care? For me particularly, I used to work for an organization strictly rooted advocating for people with disabilities. Now I'm more in the retail sector. And honestly, a lot of times it's no one pays attention to it until there's a lawsuit, until something happens. And thinking about the gentleman who had the stroke and with the ring, it's a lot of people are why on earth would we make this technology or make something accessible for such a specific population when we all know that a lot of times accessibility can raise the bar for everyone. So as me kind of mid-grade in my organization, I'm really what can I do to get the attention to really do a service to not only our company but also all of our clients?
I'll just quickly jump in. First thing is you're dealing with biases. Your organization, anybody that's pushing back against DEI or belonging is a result of biases they've either heard through the industry or their own personal biases. And I think you got to use facts like the study we're going to share with you about the fact that, Gen Z's inclusivity is really important. Even if they're not a handicap or part of that group that would be defined as, one of those segments, they still care that you care. And I think banks are all focused on growth. And growth's going to come by better relationship with your customers. And if you're alienating a certain segment of your population that's your future growth, that's a problem. And so it's raising awareness of the biases the organization has and using facts to dispel those biases.
Yeah, customer experience is a profit driver. DEI is a profit driver. Your C-suite wants profits.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's the key.
and anytime you can like point this to data, but I want to go back to you made a really good comment about the ring guy, okay? So one of the greatest leaders I ever worked under happens to be one of Chris's dear friends. And we used to go to visit bank branches together. And he would beeline for the tellers. That's who he really wanted to talk to, is the tellers. And he would always ask this question. He would, remember like we used to have like the fluorescent tube lights in our offices, but they'd never like burn out. They'd flicker for like 18 years and then they burn out. So he used to say, it was his blinking light question. And he'd say, you've got that light above your head and it's been flickering for 3 months and you haven't told anybody because you think it's only bothering you. What's your flickering light? And so this idea that we assume that why would we do this for one person? It's many. We just haven't met them yet, or we haven't recognized how many more people, that really is. So
Or you've alienated those customers.
Yeah.
Which is the bigger issue. Jen, what's your thoughts on that? How would you, you're fortunate. You were talking about the relationship you have with your CEO. It's fantastic. They listen. You've got strategies. They'll support you.
Well, they have to want it. I can't, force them. And when I was vetting this role, I've only been at this role for over a year. Before I signed up for them, during the interview process, I really wanted to vet, is this a marketing play? Is this a marketing role? To say, oh, we have a chief people and diversity officer. So I asked so many questions just to make sure that they truly believe it. Because if I'm just check the box, forget it. And I told them, I am not your person if this is just check the box. You truly have to want it and believe it, not just the CEO, but all of my peers in the C-suite. So if you don't have that, it's very difficult to get their buy-in otherwise.
The only, and I know we got to go to the next question, the only thing I would add to that is, it's important to work for an organization that you align with your personal values. And if you're finding you can't get the alignment and your C-suite doesn't align with where you want to go, then you might need to find a new organization.
That's a great point.
Right?
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm glad we're having this conversation with DEI and banking. And I think some organizations miss the mark. They do have it as a checkbox, right? They check the box. I think we have to take it one step further. And what I mean by that is, and I think, Lacroix, you touched up a little bit on it, is understanding the cultural differences and even generational differences and how banking changes for everyone. It's different. For example, cultures bank differently. They understand money differently. They don't have the same financial education differently. So what efforts are you doing in your organization to have that understanding, train to it, empower your teammates to have those conversations and even understand it from the top down that it is different. Not only do we have to mimic what the community looks like in the communities of where the branches are, but the conversations are completely different. Yes, we have the human aspect that's going to remain the same, but banking to me is different than banking in another branch that is going to be a different culture of that segment.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there, but my first place my head goes is the non-bank and underbanked in America. It's a disproportionately ridiculously large number. And banks are still an intimidating place to be, I think, in large part because, as you said, I don't necessarily walk into a bank and feel like these are my people. This is who I'm going to naturally trust. And so one thing I'll go back to is a few of my clients are big banks. And one of the things I've really asked of them, and I don't even think you need to be a big bank necessarily to adopt this, is not every teller is equal. Not every banker is equal. We also use a lot of jargon in the banking industry, titles that make sense to us, but they don't make sense to the customer. Like, what's a universal banker? I don't care. But if you look at a teller position or a branch manager position or if you're a retailer, cashier position, and you have the exact same job description across every single one of your locations, that's a missed opportunity. I have a client in Queens, New York, that has huge ethnic variances between all of their branches. You visited them, right? So you could talk to this a bit too, but that's really a push that they're working towards is, and I'll speak to the people part and you can speak to the design part, but how do we train people to really understand from a point of respect the intricacies and the wrinkles in experience within an individual community, everything from the basics of business etiquette and how I present a business card with 2 fingers on 2 hands, down to walking somebody to the door and the appropriateness of gender rules in business and all of those different things. They're very, very, very wide open to this understanding of not all branches can be equal and not every location can be the exact same business model because they're not, and they're rather different, and they're looking at the physical form too. And JP, you visited them.
Yeah, I did. Their core target group is South Asians and East Asians, so Chinese and Pakistani Indian. But when I did the audit and I went and visited their branches, they hit all the marks on having the right staff. And what was dictated by having the right staff is being able to speak the language, so Mandarin. But on all the other tick marks of the communication, the visuals, the posters, big 0, because they're all Caucasian. So I was saying, you've got digital signs, why don't you have, your managers being promoted on the signs? Why don't you have imagery of those values? Chinese values are very different than Pakistani Indian values. Why don't you reflect those values in your messaging? And that was a big miss. And so they had the infrastructure, they had the people, they had the customers, but they left the gap. And that gap was significant. So, as you look at I say the banking, you're so fortunate because, we talk about banking as a national, 3,000 branches, 1,000 branches, 500 branches. But really, you're a community bank, irrespective if you're a national bank, because you play in that community and you have an opportunity to kind of psychoanalyze that community and look at the geography and demographics of that and then cater to that specific. And I would tell you that TD is by far one of the best institutions to do that. We worked on a Chinese Mandarin branch only in the region we did that
in 1995.
95, South Asian branch.
Not 2005, 95.
Yeah. And it's part of their channel distribution strategy to look at what is the diversity of that segment. And then that drives their hiring, that drives their in-branch communication, it drives everything. The products they sell, to your point, the money transfer that goes on between Asia and North America or North America and Mexico is incredible. It's in the trillions of dollars, but banks are not capitalizing on that because they're not talking to the community.
Yeah, I'll just build on that and say, hyper-localization matters. And as someone who's straddled financial services and retailing now, and, as an example, the store in Seattle should get a lot more rain boots and umbrellas than the store in Arizona. And yet a lot of retailers say, we bought this number of pieces and we're distributing that number of pieces across all of our locations. So we have that challenge at Hudson's Bay. The other financial services example is size of office. A multi-generational family environment needs larger offices with more chairs because more people are in the conversation than the standard office with 2 chairs or 1 chair and a tiny little door. And so branch design should be different. It should be localized to the environment and it should be customized to the environment. And so I think you've heard many to one and you've heard local matters and all of those sorts of things, but I really firmly believe that there are consistent elements, but you do need to be hyper local to the environment that you're in, and that goes for everything: language, design, everything.
Great. I think we're out of time. I want to thank
One more.
Oh, one more.
We have
Sorry.
Sorry. That's all right.
I'll try to make it quick. So I'm going to tell a super fast story, and then I'm going to ask my question because I think that makes more sense. Years ago, and you may have heard this story already, I can't remember which decade it was, but the New York City Orchestra was predominantly male. And so they started, they noticed that it was almost 100% male, and they started conducting their interviews, their auditions with a curtain up so that they couldn't see the person playing the violin or whatever it was on the other side. But they noticed that nothing changed, and they realized that they could hear the click-clack of the high heels, and they knew it was a woman based on that. So then they started conducting all their auditions with the curtain, and everyone was barefoot. And now the New York City Orchestra is about 50% male, 50% female. My question is, because based on that logic, we now can use AI software to take away all of the identifiers in like a resume and a cover letter before they even get to the desk of the hiring manager, right? Which is awesome. But at the same time, you know, AI can be a hindrance when it comes to DEI because of things like embedded bias and coded bias.
Yeah.
Has it been, in your experiences, has it been a hindrance or has it been something that's helped?
Yeah, AI?
AI.
Yes, AI.
AI in the employee screening process, you mean?
The employee screening, but also in general. I mean, like for customers, you know, embedded bias is also a huge deal. But then at the same time, for blind people, being able to order something strictly with their voice online is a big deal. So I see pros and cons, and I'm just curious what your experiences have been with AI and its relation to DEI.
I personally have not seen it work that well. We've tested a few different components of it, and so for instance, I'm rewriting our team member handbook, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna write it for this section, I'm gonna put it in and see what it comes back with, or what are the predictors. It's not even close, so we're not even using it yet.
I've had a couple of clients have actually gotten in a little bit of hot water because they jumped into AI too fast, and the specific place where they stumbled was pronouns. AI guessed wrong. And the problem was they guessed it all. And the only other thing I'll say about AI, by the way, too, and you talk about applicant screening, is HR's got a long way to go in anything AI related. And taking away from DEI, we're screening out really good people before a recruiter even has a chance to see, a resume. I know many ATSs, applicant tracking systems, have actually started to give an opt-out. So they're basically saying, would you like to opt out of an AI screen of your resume, and basically forcing human eyeballs on it. And I think that that's going to become a very, very popular option. So I think we'd have a hard time embedding AI from a DEI screening perspective, because there's a lot of skepticism of what AI does to the balance of the resume, and I might be screened out automatically because it queried the wrong words out of my resume. It parsed it wrong.
Yeah. No.
Perfect way to wrap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.